She said I'd only stop shaming this family when I died. Those words didn't come from a stranger. They came from my own daughter-in-law. Elena whispered right into my ear while my son stood just a few feet away. My name is Yvaine Lockhart, and in that moment, something inside me cracked. For 3 years, I had quietly funneled money into their lives, paid for their house, their children's schools, even the vacations Elena loved to brag about. I thought I was helping. I thought it made me part of their family. Instead, she looked me in the eye and told me my very existence was a disgrace. I smiled at her then, though my chest burned, and I said, "Let's see how you manage without the money I send every month." That was the second the air in that kitchen froze, because my son turned toward me and asked the one question that would unravel everything. "Mom, what money?" The kitchen gleamed under the warm glow of pendant lights, the polished granite counters catching every reflection. Laughter drifted in from the living room where guests lingered after the Thanksgiving meal, football blaring from the flat screen. I was rinsing a dish when I felt a presence at my shoulder. Elena leaned close, her perfume sharp in the air, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. "You'll only stop shaming this family when you die." The words slid into me like a blade. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me wounded. I straightened, set the dish aside, and forced a calm smile onto my face. "Let's see how you manage without the money I send every month," I said quietly, each word deliberate. The sound of a coffee cup clinking too hard against the counter broke the silence. Michael, still holding the pot in his hand, turned to me, his brow furrowed, eyes narrowing as if he'd misheard. "Mom," he said slowly, "what money?" The words seemed to echo through the room, louder than the chatter and the television in the other space. Elena's face went pale, a flicker of panic breaking through her polished composure. Her mouth twitched, then curved into the bright, brittle smile she wore whenever she was cornered. I held her gaze, refusing to look away. The air between the three of us thickened, pressing down like a weight. The hum of conversation from the living room felt distant, almost unreal, as though the whole world had gone still, waiting for the next sound. Elena adjusted the sleeve of her blouse with trembling fingers, but her voice, when it came, was sharp with forced sweetness. "Honey, your mother's confused. She's been having moments lately." She tapped her temple lightly, a condescending gesture, as if I were nothing more than a senile nuisance. But Michael didn't look at her. He looked at me. His eyes searched mine, steady, unsettled, waiting for an answer. And for the first time in years, I didn't shrink back. I let the silence stretch, let the truth hang heavy in the air, and knew deep down that nothing in this family would ever be the same after tonight. The silence between the three of us stretched, thick and suffocating. My son stood frozen, his question still hanging in the air. Elena's hand lingered on his arm, her perfect smile plastered on as if nothing had been said. But I could feel her pulse quicken, see the stiffness in her shoulders. 3 years. That's how long I'd been wiring $2,500 to her account every single month. It started small, Ethan's private school tuition when they were struggling after Michael's commission checks dipped. Elena had come to me with wide eyes and a tremor in her voice, telling me how worried she was about their son falling behind if he had to leave the academy. I told myself it was temporary, just until things steadied for them. But temporary turned into constant. Soon it was Lily's ballet lessons, the kind with shiny pink shoes and recitals staged in theaters that charged more for costumes than I'd ever paid for my own clothes. Then came the mortgage, Elena sighing that she hated to burden me, but the roof needed repairs and the kids deserved stability. There was the trip to Disney World, complete with photographs of smiling children and a glowing Elena, posing in mouse ears. Photos sent to me like proof that my sacrifice had purchased their happiness. Every time she'd insisted the money should come directly to her. Michael's pride would be hurt if he knew, she whispered once, gripping my hand with practiced sincerity. This way, you and I keep the peace. He doesn't need to know. And I, desperate to be included, desperate to believe I was helping, agreed. I told myself it was love, that I was buying harmony, that money was the bridge between me and the family I ached to belong to. Michael's face now, staring at me in shock, shattered all of that fragile reasoning. He had no idea, not a single clue about the transfers that had bled nearly $90,000 from my account into theirs. His lips parted, as if to speak, but no words came. Elena filled the silence with a quick laugh that rang false in my ears. Honey, she offered. I never asked for any of it. Your mother insisted. She wanted to help. What was I supposed to do? Refuse? It would have been rude. I held her gaze. She looked away first. The clatter of dishes still lingered in the sink, the smell of roasted turkey clinging to the air. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. My fingers trembled, but not enough to keep me from scrolling to the list of transfers. One by one, neat as soldiers in a row, $2,500. Every month, for 3 years straight. I turned the screen toward Michael. Here. See for yourself. His eyes darted across the numbers. His pupils widened, his breath caught, and the hand holding the coffee pot began to shake. He looked up at me as though seeing me for the first time, and something in his expression broke me more than Elena's words ever could. Before he could speak, she slipped between us like a blade. Oh, sweetheart, she crooned, tapping her temple with one manicured finger. Your mother's been having moments lately, forgetting things, confusing details. We really should get her doctor to adjust her medications. The audacity of it stole the air from my lungs. After all I'd given, after all the silence I'd endured, she dared to reduce me to a confused old woman with a failing mind. Michael's gaze flickered between us. He didn't defend me. He didn't contradict her. He only stood there, lips pressed tight, as if the ground beneath him had just opened and he couldn't decide which way to fall. In that moment, the truth settled over me, heavier than any debt. I was alone. Alone in my son's kitchen, in the house my money had helped build, standing across from the woman who despised me and the man I had raised who no longer knew what to believe. The silence cut deeper than Elena's whisper, and I knew, with a clarity that left me trembling, that this night was only the beginning of a storm I could no longer hold back. The cold air outside slapped against my face the moment I stepped out of Michael's house. I pulled my coat tighter around me, the echo of Elena's words still burning in my ears. The laughter from the living room spilled faintly through the windows, muffled and distant, as though it belonged to another world entirely. By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. But beneath the shaking, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I felt a strange, quiet freedom. I sat in the driver's seat, breathing in the damp Portland air, and opened my phone. With steady fingers, I composed a short message. No more, don't ask again. Then I logged into my banking app, navigated to the automatic transfers, and canceled every one of them. The moment I hit confirm, my phone buzzed. Elena. It's just a misunderstanding. Mom. Don't let this ruin Thanksgiving. Her tone was syrupy, almost pleading. My stomach twisted. Seconds later, another buzz. If you cut the money, this family will fall apart, and it will be your fault." The sweetness was gone, replaced by venom. I stared at the words until they blurred. My breath hitched. How quickly her mask had slipped. How easily cruelty poured out of her once she lost control. Another buzz. This time, it wasn't Elena. It was Michael. Half an hour later, headlights swept across the wall of my small apartment complex. I opened the door before he knocked. He stood there, pale and exhausted, his tie loosened, his shoulders sagging. "Mom," he said, his voice low and rough. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I stepped aside, letting him in. He sank onto my worn sofa like a man carrying stones on his back. His eyes flicked around the modest living room that hadn't changed much since his childhood. I never asked about the bills," he admitted, pressing his palms together. "I thought Elena had it handled. She always said she was better with numbers. I trusted her." Hearing him say it out loud hurt more than I expected. My son, the boy I raised alone, had lived inside a story someone else had written for him. A story where his wife pulled every string and I existed only as the villain. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Michael, you need to see the truth for yourself. Tomorrow you will." The next evening, the apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the radiator. On the table in front of us, the same scarred wooden table where I once drilled multiplication tables and corrected spelling tests, lay a folder stuffed with papers. But tonight it wasn't schoolwork. It was evidence. I slid the folder toward him. "Read." Michael opened it, and his face drained of color as he flipped through the pages. Transfers, bank statements, screenshots of texts from Elena asking for urgent help. Each line carved a deeper line into his forehead. He froze at one page. "What the hell is this?" He shoved the paper toward me. A credit card statement. His name, his social security number, his debt. But he had never seen the card. "That's the first one," I whispered. He flipped further, and his hands began to tremble. $90,000, he muttered, as if saying it aloud might make it less real. "She's racked up $90,000 in debt?" I nodded. My chest ached as I watched the man I loved most in the world unravel piece by piece. Then he stopped again, staring at a document. His lips parted. His eyes went wide. This is our house." I leaned forward. "The mortgage papers, my signature." He traced the scrawl of his own name at the bottom of the page. "But I don't remember signing this." His voice cracked, disbelief turning to horror. "Michael," I said softly, "she either shoved it in front of you when you were exhausted, or she forged it." His hand shot to his hair, fingers gripping tight, pulling as though the pain in his scalp could wake him from a nightmare. His breathing came in sharp bursts. Finally, he lowered his hands and stared at me, his face etched with anguish. I let her turn you into a bank account. I let her blindfold me while she drained us both. You've been our lifeline, and I was too blind to see it. I was a fool. Mom." I reached across the table, resting my hand over his trembling one. He didn't look up, just whispered into the dim room, his voice hoarse. "She made you the bank, and she made me a blind man." The weight of his confession settled between us, heavy as stone, and I knew the storm was only beginning. The drizzle hadn't let up all afternoon, the Portland sky heavy with clouds that blurred the stadium lights into halos. I pulled my coat tighter and made my way to the bleachers, clutching a paper cup of coffee that warmed my hands more than it did my throat. Parents huddled under blankets, shouting encouragement as the kids darted across the muddy field. Then I heard it, Ethan's voice cutting through the rain. "Grandma," he broke from the pack, waving wildly. his face bright despite the drizzle. The parents around me turned their heads, eyes widening. "I thought you didn't come to games," one mother said with surprise. "Elena told us you were always too busy." Another chimed in, brows raised. "Yeah, we figured you weren't really involved." The words sank deep, leaving me breathless. For 3 years, Elena hadn't just shut me out of their home. She had erased me from their community, rewriting me as someone indifferent. When the game ended, Ethan ran straight into my arms, his hair damp, cheeks flushed. "Grandma, did you see me score? And guess what? You pay for my coach. He says I'm getting better every week." The innocence in his voice felt like both a gift and a wound. My heart lurched. I hadn't wanted him to know, hadn't wanted the children to carry the weight of those checks. But now it was out in the open, plain as day. Michael, standing a few feet away, froze. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing as though the fog around him had finally burned off. A parent approached, clapping him on the back. "You're lucky. Mike, not many kids have a grandmother willing to step up like that. Must be a huge help." I saw the realization dawn on him. Elena had taken every bit of credit for what I'd provided while poisoning my name behind my back. His face hardened, his eyes dark with understanding. He stepped closer, his hand firm on my shoulder. His voice was low, steady, but carried the weight of something final. "I need the whole truth, Mom. No more secrets. Not about any of it." The following weekend, the rain had cleared, but the ground was littered with brittle yellow leaves. I climbed the steps to Michael's porch, the air sharp with the last bite of autumn. Before I could knock, the door flew open and Lily rushed out. She clutched my hand, eyes rimmed red, her little face streaked from crying. "Grandma," she whispered, "are you mad at me? Mommy says you don't come anymore because I did something wrong." Her words sliced through me. I dropped to my knees, gathering her trembling body into my arms. "No, sweetheart, never. You've never done anything wrong." Ethan stood in the doorway, his shoulders hunched. "Mom says you don't like us," he added quietly. Behind them, Michael appeared, his face tightening as he heard every word. He looked past the children to where Elena hovered in the hallway, arms crossed, her smile brittle. "For God's sake," he snapped, voice cracking with anger. "Why are you lying to our kids?" Elena's composure shattered. She grabbed a glass from the counter and hurled it, shards exploding across the hardwood. "She's turning you against me. Your mother just wants to tear this family apart." But Michael didn't flinch. His voice, when he spoke, was colder than I'd ever heard it. "This family is already broken, Elena, and you're the one who broke it." The silence that followed was heavier than the sound of glass shattering. Ethan clung to my arm. Lily pressed her wet face into my shoulder, and Michael stood tall, no longer wavering. I saw it in his eyes. My son had chosen. The battle was no longer hidden, no longer whispered in kitchens and behind closed doors. It had burst into the open, and the war inside their marriage had officially begun. The winter rain battered against my apartment windows, wind howling through the cracks in the frame. I sat curled on the couch with a blanket pulled tight around my shoulders, the silence broken only by the rattling of the storm. Then my phone buzzed. I hesitated before picking it up. A text glared back at me from Elena. "You think cutting the money will break me? The kids will hate you when they lose their school and their friends. You've destroyed this family yourself." My breath caught. My hands shook so hard the phone nearly slipped from my grasp. I pressed a fist to my chest, forcing air into my lungs, but it came ragged and shallow. She was using the children, my grandchildren, as weapons now. The phone lit again. Another message. This one was worse. "No wonder your husband died. To get away from you. The words pierced like a blade. My knees gave way, and I sank against the arm of the couch, clutching the phone as though it might burn me. Images of my husband flooded back, his laugh, the way he'd held my hand when I was younger, the quiet steadiness of his love. Gone too soon, long before his time. And now Elena had twisted even that sacred wound into poison. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth, a sob rising in my throat. My whole body trembled. For a moment, I felt I might shatter completely. The door opened. Footsteps crossed the threshold. Michael's voice, tired and heavy, called softly, "Mom?" I couldn't answer. He came into the living room and froze when he saw me. My face must have told him everything. Wordlessly, I extended the phone toward him. He took it, his brow furrowed. As his eyes scanned the screen, his expression darkened, jaw tightening until it looked carved from stone. His breath hissed out between his teeth, a sound of fury and disbelief. Without hesitation, he snatched the phone fully from my hand and typed. His fingers moved with a steadiness that belied the storm in his eyes. "Touch my mother again, and I'll file for a restraining order. Enough." He hit send with a force that rattled the device. He stood tall, the storm outside echoing the one inside him, his shoulders squared as if he were shielding me from every cruel word ever thrown my way. For the first time in years, my son stood firmly between me and the woman who despised me. My vision blurred with tears, but this time they weren't from pain alone. Relief surged through me, warm and overwhelming. After years of silence, of swallowing every insult and buying my place in their lives, I was no longer standing alone. I looked at Michael, my boy. Now a man hardened by betrayal but finally awake to the truth, and the tears spilled down my cheeks. They were tears of freedom, tears of release, and as the storm raged on outside, I knew something inside me had broken open, not from Elena's cruelty, but from the sudden, undeniable realization that at last I was being defended. The courthouse in Multnomah County was as cold and impersonal as I'd feared. Polished wood, high ceilings, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. The air smelled faintly of rain carried in on coats and umbrellas, but inside it was sterile, hushed, a place where truth was meant to strip bare every pretense. I sat behind Michael, my palms pressed together around the thick folder of papers I'd guarded for months. My knuckles were white, my breath shallow, but I would not let them see me falter. Not today. When the judge entered, the room rose, then settled again into silence. Michael's lawyer, a sharp woman with a steady voice, began her opening, calm, factual, precise. Then she laid it all out. 3 years of transfers, nearly $90,000 quietly siphoned from my account to prop up a lifestyle Elena paraded as her own achievement. The room seemed to tilt as she placed the statements onto the table in front of the judge. My eyes flicked to Elena. She sat poised in her tailored suit, her blonde hair smoothed into place, her lips pressed into the faintest suggestion of sorrow. But I saw the tension in her jaw, the slight twitch in her fingers as she gripped the edge of the table. "Your Honor," the lawyer said firmly, "these weren't gifts. This was financial manipulation, exploitation of a vulnerable parent's goodwill. And while my client worked long hours believing he was sustaining his family, his wife concealed both the debt she created and the lifeline provided by his mother." The judge studied the documents without expression. That was when Elena's mask cracked. She sniffled, then dabbed her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from her bag, her voice catching theatrically. "I didn't ask for this money," she insisted, voice quivering. "She forced it on me. She said she wanted to help. And what was I supposed to do? Refuse her? I was trying to keep peace in the family. I only ever wanted harmony." A murmur spread across the courtroom, low and skeptical. The lawyer's eyes didn't so much as flicker. She let the silence hang before stepping closer, voice firm and cutting. "Miss Morrison, you claim you never wanted the money, yet you now request alimony based on a standard of living that existed only because of those funds. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim victimhood while demanding financial benefits built entirely on your mother-in-law's sacrifices." A ripple moved through the benches behind me. Even the judge's brow arched slightly at the contradiction. Elena's face stiffened, her tears drying as quickly as they had appeared. She tried to speak, but her voice stumbled. The lawyer pressed forward. "Let's be clear. The lifestyle you bragged about, the private schools, the trips, the renovations, none of it was sustained by your husband's income. It was funded by his mother, without his knowledge. You misled him. You misled this court. And now you want to be rewarded for it?" Elena's composure collapsed. Her hands trembled against the table, her cheeks blotched red. "That's not true," she muttered, but the conviction was gone. The judge lifted a hand. The room hushed instantly. "Mrs. Morrison," the judge said, voice low and resonant, "you've admitted the funds came from your mother-in-law. You've admitted the household relied on those funds. You can't demand alimony on a lifestyle that was never built on your husband's earnings. The request is denied." The gavel struck wood with a sharp crack. The words rang in my ears like a bell tolling the end of a long war. Elena slumped in her seat, her eyes wide, lips parted in shock. Michael sat straighter, shoulders no longer bowed by shame. His lawyer gave a brief nod, then slid the papers back into their folder. The judge continued, her tone final. "Custody will rest with the father. The mother will have supervised visitation until further review. This court is adjourned." The echo of the gavel faded into silence. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath until it escaped me in a long, shaky exhale. The folder in my hands slipped slightly, its weight suddenly lighter. For 3 years, I had carried the burden of silence, of humiliation, of being painted as meddlesome while secretly bleeding myself dry for their sake. Now, at last, that silence had been broken under the sharp light of truth. Michael turned, his eyes meeting mine. There was sorrow there. Yes, but something else too. Gratitude. And the first glimmer of freedom. I pressed his hand briefly, unable to speak, afraid my voice would tremble with everything I was feeling. The storm I had carried for 3 years had finally broken, and in the solemn quiet of that courtroom, I felt the weight begin to lift, as though justice had reached down and peeled the chains from my shoulders. Snow blanketed the roofs of Portland, soft and quiet, as though the whole city had wrapped itself in silence for December. Inside my little apartment, though, it was anything but still. Ethan balanced on a chair, hanging ornaments with more enthusiasm than precision, while Lily carefully unwrapped each fragile bauble as if it were a treasure. The scent of cinnamon and warm waffles drifted through the kitchen, mingling with the sharp pine of the Christmas tree. "Grandma!" Ethan shouted as he stepped down from the chair, his cheeks pink from excitement. "This year's better than when we lived in the big house. Here, everyone laughs." His words struck something tender deep inside me. I smiled and ruffled his hair, fighting the sting of tears. The big house had been full of polished surfaces and Elena's carefully staged perfection, but laughter had been scarce. Lily reached up on her tiptoes, holding the golden star in her small hands. I lifted her gently, steadying her as she placed it at the very top of the tree. When she climbed back down, she looked at me with those wide, earnest eyes and whispered, "I know you never hated me, Grandma." I pulled her into my arms, pressing my cheek to her soft hair. Never, sweetheart. Not for a second. My chest swelled with a peace I hadn't known in years. For too long, I'd been afraid their young hearts would believe the lies whispered into their ears. Tonight, I knew the truth had won. The rest of the evening unfolded like a gift I hadn't dared to hope for. We sang carols off-key, laughed when the strings of lights tangled, and devoured too many cookies before bedtime. When the children finally curled up on the couch under thick blankets, I sat back and took in the sight. 2 little bodies safe, happy, unburdened. My home was small, but it was filled with warmth, not tension, love, not manipulation. Outside of these walls, my life had shifted too. I joined a book club at the public library where women my age gathered every Thursday night, sharing stories and laughter over paper cups of coffee. I picked up watercolor classes at the community center, my brushes clumsy at first, but steadying with practice, splashing soft color onto paper until new worlds bloomed, alone, but not lonely, busy, but not consumed. For the first time in decades, I was living a life that belonged only to me. As the fire crackled low, my mind wandered back to that night in the kitchen, the hiss of Elena's whisper, "You'll only stop shaming this family when you die." The memory was sharp, but it no longer cut. Instead, it lay dull in my chest, an old scar. I saw now how wrong she'd been. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't shame. I had been strength all along, the quiet strength that paid bills, that endured insults, that held a fractured family together when no one else could. And now, I was more than that. I was a safe harbor, a source of love not bought with checks, but built with presence. I was the home my grandchildren ran to, not because of what I could provide, but because of who I was. Ethan stirred, half asleep, humming the tune of Silent Night. Lily mumbled something about saving cookies for Santa, her small voice fading as she drifted into dreams. I tucked the blankets tighter around them and turned back toward the tree. The lights shimmered, reflecting in the window like stars scattered across the glass. I stood there, the glow of Christmas wrapping around me, and felt the truth settle deep in my bones. The woman who once tried to erase me from my own family had failed. Her words no longer had power. "I am not a disgrace," I whispered into the quiet room. "I am strength. I am home." The final image etched itself into my heart, the twinkle of lights dancing across my smile, my grandchildren's laughter lingering in the air, and the soft chorus of their voices singing carols. It was small, imperfect, and utterly mine. A peaceful winter, at last.